So I think there's an important distinction to be made between nutritionists and
Oh, okay.
dietitians.
Right. Yeah. It seems, I just all the literature lately, all this research that has been going on, just keeps on piling up more and more evidence. It seems toward a low carbohydrate, healthy fat, more protein in your diet. Sooner than later, it seems like it would have to break in the favor of the healthier diet, and hopefully that we can reverse the obesity trend then as well in the U.S. But since we are talking a little bit about nutrition, I did want to ask you if you had any general, I know every person is different, and what every person will be able to do for their heart and other age-related diseases is going to be a little bit different. But what about some general advice as far as nutrition? I know you're a big advocate of the low-carb or lower-carb diet, such as Atkins or South Beach, but also perhaps some exercise advice that you find generally for most people would be helpful in combating heart disease.
Well, Justin, I come at this from a slightly different angle, and that is when I meet somebody, it's often by way of a high heart scan score. In other words, what I read.
A bad score is what you would say.
That's right.
Okay.
So truly anything above zero. But let's say I have a man who comes into the office or into our program, the Plaque program, and he's 52, say, and his heart scan score is 400. Let's just say
400.
Normal is zero.
Ooh.
So he's got quite well-established coronary plaque. Now, contrary to many of my colleagues' practices, this man likely does not need a procedure. In fact, the key to prevention is you do these things before hospital procedures, and dangers of heart attack and such are evident or manifest. And so we do these things early while you still have power to control it. Now, the question I always ask is, why do you have this in the first place? Now, conventional notions would say high cholesterol. Let's put aside obvious things like smoking. But why would a person have any degree of coronary plaque? Conventional notions would say high cholesterol. That's absolute and utter nonsense.
Really?
That, in my view, yes, that in
Okay.
my view is a fiction that is propagated by drug companies, because cholesterol is, bar none, the most profitable means to address the heart disease causation question.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the number one most common cause of heart disease in the U.S. by a long stretch is small LDL particles. Now, most people have never even heard of this,
Sure.
or they've heard passing mention of it, but it affects, the published data would suggest at least 70% of people with heart disease share to some degree this small LDL pattern. In my experience, it's worse than that. It's probably 85%, and it's gotten worse. And I think it's gotten worse because of the emergence of this notion that we should be eating lots and lots and lots of whole grains and wheat products and whole wheat bread and bagels and bran muffins.
All the carbs.
Just I can tell you my experience from, I believe this was about 14 years ago. I attended a conference where Dr. Dean Ornish gave a very persuasive talk on the value of a low-fat diet. And he presented his data on presumed regression of heart disease, and my attention was just wrapped in this. I thought he made an effective case, and so I did it myself.
Sure.
I followed the Ornish program for heart disease reversal, so-called, and I cut out all oils, all meats. It's a vegetarian, super low-fat diet. And I'll tell you what happened. I gained 30 pounds.
Uh-oh.
My HDL cholesterol dropped to 27. My triglycerides went to 350, which are both gross distortions. I became a diabetic, and my blood pressure was 150/90. Now, all through this, I was jogging 5 miles a day. So it wasn't as if I was sitting back. People say people are fat now because they play video games. Kids play video games. You're watching too much TV and you're not doing anything. You're eating badly. You know what? There's many people eating what appears to be a healthy diet, exercise, yet still gain weight and still have all these abnormal patterns. Now, hidden within a low HDL and high triglyceride pattern is the true heart disease causation abnormality, which is small LDL. That has emerged by far and away to be the number one cause for heart disease in the U.S., the number one cause for having coronary plaque as detected by any means, but I would advocate heart scanning because it's so easy. And so I meet this person, for instance, a 52-year-old man with a heart scan score of 400, and more than likely he has small LDL as number one cause for his plaque, and probably has 5 other causes, by the way. And so the diet I advocate is one that corrects that pattern, because that is the dominant pattern, and you often find that many of the other hidden patterns, the things that cause heart disease as well as diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, etc., will respond to the dietary maneuvers that correct small LDL. Now, something that a lot of the followers of the Track Your Plaque program will attest to is this. You might think I'm a little bit nutty when I tell you this, and I've heard this for years, and I didn't believe it myself for the longest time. And that is a very quirky approach I've used. I find it to be realistic, practical, easy to remember, and that is the elimination of all foods made with wheat.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. It is really, in some ways, it's similar to what is articulated in Atkins.
Sure.
It's similar to what's articulated in Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Agatston's South Beach diet program. But I find it's a much more approachable, much quicker, much more dramatic effect to simply say, I'm going to eliminate anything that contains wheat in it, even if it's whole grain, whole wheat. And by the way, second of importance is cornstarch also. But you eliminate these foods, and peculiar things happen. First of all, about 50 to 70% of people actually go through a wheat withdrawal process. And this took me by surprise. You eliminate suddenly all whole grains, all wheat products, and you go through a peculiar process where you're mentally cloudy and tired for about 2 to 5 days.
Sure. Okay.
And by the way, I know of no way around that. I'd like to find a way to blunt that so that it's not so tough.
It'd make it easier for people to get off the carbs then, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some people are incapable of doing it. They say, I couldn't do it. I was 3 days into it, and I have to work, and I just simply couldn't do it. So we do need a way to get around that effect. But nonetheless, that alone there, I think, yields some important lessons to us. But you eliminate the wheat. Now, this is in an otherwise healthy diet. Obviously, we urge you to fill your diet with vegetables, some fruit, healthy oils. If you are a meat eater, lean meats, lots and lots of raw nuts. So it's not as if to say be wheat free and eat Snickers and drink Hawaiian punch. Of course not.
No. Yeah, and I wonder actually that going wheat free is a simple way to lower your carbohydrate intake, because so many things are made out of wheat. But also, I imagine that, you could also do with most of the refined grains or the starchy grains like corn or potatoes, things like that. I wonder, I'm sure that would help as well.
They do. That's exactly right. The practical approach I've taken with many people is if you eliminate wheat and cornstarch, you've fixed about 90% of the problems in diet. That is, putting aside candy, cookies, and the obvious things that no one needs me to tell you aren't good for you. But the big mistake I think we've all made in the last several years is to follow this notion of lots and lots of healthy whole grains. And that is exactly what the USDA articulates in its food pyramid. And the food pyramid, that's the widest part of the bottom.
I know. It should be more like a food rectangle or something where they cut down that base,
Perhaps a food hellhole, more like. That's right. I've seen this turn sour so many times.
Sure.
Now, the need to follow this approach varies with genetic type. So it's not as if everybody needs to follow this to the absolute
right.
T,
But generally
speaking, ideally, this is based on your specific type. What I mean by type, from my perspective, and in our program, is what's called the lipoprotein type. So if you have a severe small LDL, say for instance 70 to 90% of all your LDL particles are in the small, that responds extremely quickly and effectively to a carbohydrate restriction.
Okay.
And the best and fastest way I know of to get there is to eliminate wheat. By the way, elimination of wheat, curiously, I find a lot easier than reduction.
Oh, okay. It's like going cold turkey with smoking or drinking, same kind of thing?
Exactly. Same kind of thing. It's one thing to tell an alcoholic to stop drinking. He knows that. But if you tell him, why don't you just have 3 shots of vodka a day, and that's better than 2 liters, it is better. but it's probably practically impossible.
Tougher to get on that diet. Yeah, I found